Hello, everybody, and welcome here to the Wine with Jimmy channel. Thank you so much for clicking by. This is all about wine education, really designed to help you get the maximum enjoyment from the wonderful world of wine. Here, I have a series on mastering Germany, and this is a big, extensive product with lots of different videos to help you really deep dive into Germany. Some videos like this one are available as free content on YouTube, but in fact, the whole series is available to the Wine with Jimmy Club monthly subscription service. For just £3.99 a month, you have access to presentations like this, key wine recommends in multiple places like the US and the UK, certainly getting into deep depth with certain regions like Armenia, Georgia, and lots of others. There's wonderful amounts of information there that you will not regret joining for just £3.99 a month. So here I'm looking at the winemaking through Germany in quite a lot of detail. If you happen to have a question or a comment, you can leave it in the comments section below this video. Make sure you click like and subscribe. Okay, so let's talk about mastering Germany in terms of its winemaking. Now, I think there are really distinctively two major changes that are really driving the quality and dynamism of German wines today. So certainly it's going to be the two major areas that we talk about when discussing wine production, and that will be in terms of grape growing and wine making. So there's certainly an evolution in the way that lots of viticulturalists, agronomists, grape growers are tending to their vineyards. And then when those grapes come into the winery, of course, there's a significant amount of evolution, creativity and innovation in winemaking too. So that's where we're now really at a golden age of understanding German wines and enjoying them. The quality is exceptionally high. So historically in Germany, winemakers would make a little bit of many products. But of course, coming into the modern age, contemporary, we are looking at people's consumer tastes changing. And of course, Germany has been significantly affected by that with the shift from sweet to dry consumption. And of course, winemaking having to reflect that as well. But this, of course, is around the globe. It's also about how to access that information, what to share, the kind of packaging behind it as well. There's lots of innovation that is currently happening. So what you'll see in Germany is certainly a lot of Weinguts, so wineries that are reshaping their structure, reorganizing what they have to offer. Instead of having maybe 50 different wines, they are focusing on maybe just 1, 2 or 3 grape varieties, and then really becoming experts within those to really represent things like tradition, talent, but also, of course, that quite famous word of terroir. So everything to do with the landscape, the vine, the geology, the environment, but also the human connection as well. So this is, I just mentioned this, but there certainly has been a big shift in change on understanding winemaking. So an improved knowledge base. So today's German winemakers are really well trained. They tend to have either extensive experience in places in the world to really sort of hone their skills, and or the expertise that comes from studying at certain wine schools across Germany and the world. And if you were to compare that to the generations that would come before, at least sort of 2 or 3 generations before, you would find that those older generations would tend to be very local and learn their product locally. But the modern generation, the contemporary generation, certainly have much more experience globally, and then a lot more experience in terms of knowledge in school winemaking, for example. You can also state that with great global interconnection around the world, we've also got a great sharing of ideas that is currently happening. So we are finding that winemakers now have a lot of experience, not only themselves, but they are gaining from experience of others through certain mediums, such as connecting at wine fairs, connecting at conferences, but also the world of social media. So the resulting refinement and expression and explosion of styles from the traditional sort of cask fermented, German cask fermented single plot Rieslings, going towards things that may be orange amber wines, for example, the emergence of the fungus resistance PVs, the impact of wines being aged under floor. We are certainly getting a big diversity now. And like I mentioned, it's really quite exciting what we have coming out of Germany, as with many other countries. I want to make a note on sulfur dioxide here before I move into talking about dry wines, and that is that sulfur dioxide is certainly commonly used in Germany, as it's added, as in other places worldwide, to prevent microbial spoilage, maybe browning of musts and wines, and oxidation. Now, there are some wineries that would opt not to add much SO2 or none at all. And of course, that is certainly a trend that we've seen more commonly with, say, natural wines, for example. But we are still having sulfur dioxide being used as a very useful part of the winemaker's toolkit in order to make sure that that wine gets to market in really fit condition and can live in the market as well. So that history of Germany using significant amounts of sulfur dioxide for certainly styles like Riesling and styles of Rieslings that have more sugar, that need the protection because it's easier for bacteria to spoil when there's sugar in play. This is something that is common in Germany. Now, before the creation of sterile filtration in the middle of the 20th century, those German Rieslings would be certainly prone to problems, but SO2 would come in and prevent those issues, or at least prevent or protect against those issues. Also, to prevent things like re-fermentation when you've got active yeast and sugar in the bottle potentially going to market. They are major reasons why we would use SO2 in the past. But of course, today there is technology and modern expertise, and we know that we don't need to use heavy amounts of SO2 today. We want to make it so small doses of it at the right times is very important. And then also, the shift away from sweet wines to dry wines means there is less SO2 being used today in German winemaking, as there is less need. Now, I've actually shown you on this slide here the pH levels and then the molecular sulfur dioxide in terms of percentage. And when you have a look at this, you'll see that wines that sit around 2.9, 3, 3.1, 3.2 have very high percentages of molecular SO2, which is not bound, it's free SO2, which means it stays very well protected. So you use it very sparingly, the SO2, in low pH wines, such as Riesling. And that means it has and carries protection. If you go down that list to wines that have much higher pHs, 3.5 to 3.9, you'll see that the percentage of molecular SO2, in fact, is very low, and you'll need to add higher amounts of sulfur dioxide in order to protect your wine. So this shift to dry wines means you don't have to add much sulfur, and because a base wine, most important grape variety of Riesling, is in play with low pHs, generally, you will find that the wines are naturally quite well protected. So let's talk more about that shift to dry wines. Now, it's a big shift. 60% today of German wines that are made are dry. And this is a big shift from just a few decades ago. It's being driven by consumer taste change, but also climate change. But you will also talk that we mentioned that we have great expertise and understanding today of farming and cellar techniques. Dry wines in Germany tend to be varietal. So they tend to be of a singular grape variety and not blended. And wines that are made for more immediate consumption are typically bottled early the following year. So early spring, sort of late winter, early spring. But the more complex, richer styles may either be held in the winery, aging on lees, for example, or might be held in the bottle by the winery and released to market later, certainly in order to gain more complexity. So what are the legal definitions then for a dry wine in Germany? And if you are on a health conscious kick, you might find this information very good. If you see dry wines in German, it is Trocken. So you'll see here is the fantastic Nacher estate of Dunhof, their Weißburgunder Trocken. And that means the dry Pinot Blanc. Now, dry or Trocken is legally defined as still wines having a maximum of 9 grams per litre of residual sugar and a maximum acidity that is no more than 2 grams per litre less than the residual sugar. And that, in essence, gives you an ability to sort of manage that balance, as it were, between the residual sugar and the acidity. There are some other terminologies, though, we must understand. So we have halbtrocken. And halbtrocken means you're kind of half dry, which another way to say that is off dry. So these are still wines that may contain up to 15 grams per litre residual sugar with a maximum acidity of 10 grams per litre less than the residual sugar. Here's a label from Pfalz, from Karlstadt, one of the big places. And this is the very famous Sauermagen, also a very popular gastronomical dish locally as well. Look it up. It may surprise you. So yeah, you'll see Halbtrocken there. So this, by law, will have somewhere up to 15 grams per litre of residual sugar. Now, Germany is certainly a country that has been at the forefront of industrialization. And it certainly has filtered, excuse the pun, into the wine industry as well. So we do see a significant production of wine that is done exceptionally modern in Germany. And that is, in fact, something that's rubbed off into places like Austria, places like Italy, for example, and even into France. So it's very typical for white wine making, which we're now talking about, that you'll have whole cluster pressing. So this is where grapes are hand harvested as clusters and then put into a typical pneumatic press. And that is to obtain the cleanest juice. Now, a gentle handling of the fruit at the press lowers the exposure to the browning of oxidation, and that will help, of course, preserve the very fundamental primary aromas of Riesling. So this may be in sort of vacuum environments or heavily flushed with gas environments, things like nitrogen and argon. Now, temperature controlled fermentation is also something which was really pioneered by Germans. It's one of the most important modern technological advances in the wine industry, and it allows, in terms of white winemaking, very gentle, long, cool fermentations instead of ones that are just warm, quick, and create a volatile acid component. So you'll find that we now have white wines in a beautiful state where they are with great aromatics, which are very much inherent of their specific grape variety, maximum fruit character. None of that has been blown off by a very hot, warm to hot, quick ferment. So it enables to capture those, which is mightily important. Let's talk a little bit about white wine additions. Hopefully, here we go. So just a few things here. So where permitted by law, acid or sugar additions or adjustments are made before fermentation begins. The addition of concentrated grape must, or something which we call rectified concentrated grape must, CGM, or frozen concentrate, is only permitted for wines that are classified as basically German table wine, which is called Deutscher Wein, that you'll see up on your slide. Sugar additions are actually forbidden forthright for Pradeket wines. So, of course, that is your top classification, which spans from Cabernet to Trockenbeeren Auslese. Another thing which is always a debatable point about white winemaking is the role of malolactic conversion. Now, I'll just quickly recap what this is, but this is a decision that the winemaker will make. He or she will decide to put this in action, so put their wine through this by promoting malolactic, which is converting the malic acid to lactic acid by the action of LAB. That's the lactic acid bacteria. Some of this is found naturally within the wine, but more often it is added to induce this process. Now, that will mean that you will find the wine converting its sharp, higher malic acids into softer lactic acids. The whole acidity of the wine drops, and the wine becomes less about sort of brightness, focus, and sharpness, and more about softness and roundness in that wine style. You might also get notes of cream and butter, potentially. Now, lactic notes are not always desirable in all wines. Certainly, Riesling is one of these. So malolactic conversion is normally actually stopped, or let's say suppressed, in aromatic varieties like Gewürztraminer, Muscat, Riesling, Sauvignon Blanc. This will happen by that really useful toolkit, which is that sulfur dioxide in a slightly heavier dose, which will kill off any LAB and stop it from actually happening. And also at the bottling phase, just before the wine goes into bottle, more sulfur dioxide will be added in order to just make sure that there's no malolactic conversion happening in bottle. So I mentioned that Riesling commonly will not go through this and it's suppressed. However, low intervention producers may let it occur. So it may be that you find slightly creamier expressions, and it's a complete decision that's going to be made by the winemaker. Another thing just to mention here on, I say white winemaking, but it is made from black grapes, but it still is what we call a white wine, or potentially some of them lightly pink. So you may have heard of before, of course, in sparkling wine, the terminology called Blanc de noir. And this means a white sparkling wine made from black grapes. In Germany and in Austria also, they actually have a category of still wines for this, like you see here. Here's the fantastic Meyerneckel from Durnau in the R region to the left-hand side. And you see this is their Illusion Blanc de Noir. And now this is a light, still white wine that is made from Spätburgunder. So this is fairly popular in Germany. It's fairly popular for still wine. So do look out for this. And before I wrap up this first little part, I just want to mention something about something called bckser that you see here, which is a sulfur-like aroma, which occasionally may be found on German Rieslings and sometimes even Silvaner. Now, bckser refers to sulfur compounds that can be formed during fermentation process. And this gives the wine an aroma which is very much like rotten vegetables or rotten eggs. Now, this is the reaction between the hydrogen and sulfur within the wine in a certain environment, typically when the yeast is a little bit more stressed and slightly warmer ferments, and you'll find that you get this binding of H2S, which can make it really quite smelly. But there's others, stuck ferments, so slow and stuck ferments. High temperatures, like I mentioned, but a lack of nutrients for the yeasts, which may come from the specific vintage and the access that that juice and the wine has had to those nutrients. Maybe unripe and damaged fruit, rotten grapes, and certain yeast strains as well will have the ability to create those components. J.J. Prum from the Mosel have been known to have this reductive note in small amounts in their very young Rieslings, but with time in bottle or time with air once opened, it does completely blow off. That brings me to the conclusion of this first video on winemaking. I hope you've enjoyed all of the information around the sort of introduction to winemaking and white winemaking. Please do join me for part 2 when we talk about orange, pink, and red, and also then parts 3 and 4 where we start to talk about other styles as well, like sparkling, for example. If you do have a comment or question, please do get in touch by leaving that below. Make sure you click like and subscribe. And remember, if you want access to part 2 and part 3 and 4 of this winemaking series and the whole Mastering Germany series, then you can go along to Wine with Jimmy and subscribe to the monthly club, which is called the Wine with Jimmy Club. And that'll give you, for just $3.99, access to tons of exclusive content. Thank you very much. And if you do find yourself in the UK, come and say hello for a glass, or bottle. Ciao for now. Danke.